Hello and welcome to Sticky from the Inside, the employee engagement podcast that looks at how to build stickier, competition-smashing, consistently successful organisations from the inside out. I'm your host, Andy Gorham, and I'm on a mission to help more businesses turn the lights on behind the eyes of their employees, light the fires within them, and create tons more success for everyone. This podcast is for all those who believe that's something worth going after and would like a little help and guidance in achieving that. Each episode, we dive into the topics that can help create what I call stickier businesses. The sort of businesses where people thrive and love to work, and where more customers stay with you and recommend you to others because they love what you do and why you do it. So, if you want to take the tricky out of being sticky, listen on. Okay then, have you ever experienced some kind of workplace conflict? I expect most of us have at one time or another. Now that kind of stuff can drain energy, stifle creativity, and seriously damage your company's culture, let alone cause you untold amounts of worry, pain, stress, and, whilst all that's going on, total suppression of your performance too. Yet, many businesses still approach conflict resolution with outdated, top-down methods that can often make things worse, not better. And what if the answer wasn't stricter policies or stronger discipline, but what if compassion, understanding, and genuine human dialogue could transform your workplace into one where people thrive? Obvious? Common sense even? Maybe. But that's not everyone's lived experience. And so today I am delighted to be joined by Maria Arpa, an expert in workplace dynamics, compassionate communication, and conflict resolution. Maria's journey, to me, is nothing short of extraordinary, taking her from mediating neighbourhood and gang disputes in London's toughest streets to becoming an influential advisor for senior executives and global companies today. Her innovative dialogue roadmap combines heart-centered communication with practical strategies that not only resolve conflict, but actively build healthier relationships at the same time. Now, Maria's holistic, pragmatic approach has been embraced by organizations ranging from renowned restaurant chains to diverse global communities. And her methods aren't just about reducing suffering, they're about enhancing productivity, retaining talent, and creating environments where people feel genuinely valued and heard. So, if you've ever wondered if or how compassion can become one of your strongest leadership strategies, stick around. This conversation could radically reshape how you and your organization approach difficult conversations and challenging dynamics. Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. I feel so deeply honoured. And then I kept looking over my shoulder and going, is he talking about me?
Of course I'm talking about you, my lovely. You come with
So lovely. Thank you.
one hell of a reputation for this. And I am really interested in hearing about your journey and the dialogue roadmap. But before we kind of dive headlong into that, I've tried in my own way to give an introduction to you and what you do and what you focus on. But you have a go. Tell us about you. What are you up to at the moment?
Oh, wow. Well, so a lot of my work now is, I think, in three areas. So one is prisons, and I go back into that in a minute. The other is workplaces. I'm really interested in workplaces and how things are developing and shaping and the kinds of changes and responses that we need that are different to the responses that we perhaps needed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I also run a 1-year training for people that want to do this work.
So you're passing
and then
it on.
I do my own podcast, but, perhaps you'll let me give that a plug later on. But
No question. We'll get into all of that. No problem. I'm fascinated by this journey from gangland to corporate, which I don't know, may feel the same at different times depending who you're dealing with. But just take me through that. How have you come from from that sort of environment to where you work today? What's happened?
So if I go right back,
Yeah,
and
do it.
those of you that kind of recognise my accent will know pretty well. Whilst when I'm in America, they laugh my accent. It's so wonderful to be here. It's always kind of funny because I don't want to say like when I'm in the UK, I'm treated like I'm an idiot with this accent. So, um, it's very working class. It's an obsolete accent now because this accent doesn't exist. It's kind of evolved into something else. Um, but it's a very working class, slum driven London. My home was declared unfit for human habitation, that sort of beginnings. Um, and then into entrepreneurship, that was my way out of the ghetto. And I have a background in advertising and marketing. And then what happened was I started to feel like I was in the spiritual desert. It was lovely. I had all the trappings for really good clients, blue chip clients, and I had all the
Mm,
trappings on the outside, but a desert on the inside. Um, and they say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
nice.
And that in 1 year, I discovered Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. I became a volunteer mediator in neighbour disputes in housing estates, and I became a Reiki master. I learned
Wow.
Reiki, which is energy work,
Yeah,
and
I'm familiar
that's
with
a very
Reiki. Yeah.
powerful cocktail. That all three in one go. And I suddenly kind of had an enlightened path and I could see a way forward. And I felt that I could use my creativity that I'd previously been using in advertising and marketing, could use it to be of service. Um, so that was the journey. And then I moved into an area and there was much more gang activity. I mean, who'd have thought a person with my accent could be accused of gentrification? You buy a bigger house than you would get because you moved to a cheaper area. Um, and and I didn't want to be part of the problem. I wanted to be part of the solution. So I literally did. A 7-year-old girl was fatally shot near where I live, round the corner from where I live. It made headline news. I was bringing up teenagers. The gang activity was dangerous. Um, and after that shooting, and when the police decided to arrest somebody, they created a vacuum in the gang activity, which meant that there were drive-by shootings every day,
Yeah.
like literally. And it was now spreading out of the gang activity. It wasn't just between themselves. And, would I do it again? Probably not. But, at the time, I went out on the streets and just started. And, it's not as good as it sounds because most people think you're mental and cross the road. But I
Well,
just
that's
wanted to find out what was going on.
well. I don't find you mental. I find you incredibly inspiring because just for that very point, with that stuff going on, I mean, you tell me. The ghettos of Grey Surrey is about as deep as I've got. Whenever I say I'm from Surrey, they go, "Oh, how posh!" And I go, "Well, yeah, not where I came from, but whatever. Nothing compared to what you're talking about, right?" But I would imagine people maybe split into two categories at that point. There are people who think, no, this is not for me. I want out. I want safety. And yet you crossed the street. You went towards it. You sound like compelled by curiosity. What is going on? What is driving it? Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so having been a volunteer in neighbour disputes, I could understand there were certain things I was understanding about, or trying to understand. And the question that I was asking myself that sort of also related to my own childhood and the brutality of living in the slums was,
Mm,
why do people fight? Because there are no winners.
yeah.
You could win the argument, but there really are no winners. It's a pointless exercise. But what I started to see was all arguments are the same. They really are underneath, at the very heart of it. They're all the same. what's different is how many rocks or weapons or the size of the weapons and resources I have to throw at somebody else.
What
That's
makes
it.
them what makes them the same, Maria, in your experience today? Why do you say they are the same? What is it?
So I could give this to you very easily. There are 3 conflict messages,
Mm-hmm.
and you can look at this at the micro and the macro level. So the first conflict message is, you changed to suit me. No, you changed to suit me. No, you changed to suit me. Now, if you put a power imbalance in that,
Mm.
then you've really got something very toxic,
Yeah.
right? Then the other message is a competition to the bottom, which is, I'm worse off than you. No, you're much worse. No, I'm much more worse off than you. No, you've no idea how badly off I am. I see that a lot in couple relationships,
Right.
and it's competing for an empty pot of empathy. But the true conflict message, when you can get beyond that, the true conflict message is, I need to know I matter.
Okay.
I need to know I matter. And again, when you look at workplaces and you put power imbalances or gangs or anywhere where there's hierarchical structures and people with more resources and weapons than others, you're in a very toxic place.
Mm.
So we need, the things that we've been using, we can alleviate the pain and the suffering, and we can use enforcement. But, when I look back over 30 years, very little has changed in our ability to work through conflict and come out the other side. Very little has changed with the mainstream technologies and methodologies.
Yeah. And I guess then this is why you may say it is or it isn't, but if we've got these kind of 3 fundamental, I guess, essences of argument and conflict, the similarities between the street gangs that you've dealt with and now the corporate boardrooms that you kind of help facilitate, it's the same thing going on, right?
It's pretty much the same thing. It's just levels of politeness and
Less weapons.
because you can still be very polite and be toxic and an enforcer and using your authority or power over others. You can do that very politely, and the difference being the willingness to cross the line into physical violence or not.
Yeah, less of that in the boardrooms
Yeah,
of Surrey,
obviously.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
clearly.
maybe. So your message, or one of your messages, is all about compassionate communication. And it's a topic, not exactly what we talk about all the time, but we do talk a lot about human skills, empathy, compassion, these sorts of things. I think they're massively important in today's workplace. I think the society that we live in today demands it, and businesses are catching up slowly. But I sometimes get accused of being a bit of a fluff monster with all this sort of stuff. Come on, Andy, business is about tough stuff. And I don't think any of this human skills, as I will call it, is anything other than tough. I think this is some of the toughest stuff we do. But is compassionate work entirely practical, Maria, from your perspective, or is it in danger of crossing the fluff zone? What would you say to that?
Well, I can only speak for the work that I do, and I know that my work is rigorous.
Yeah.
It holds boundaries. It it helps everybody to find a path, because you see, compassion is not about being nice. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with being nice. In fact, I would say I'm not a very nice person, but I'll give you the shirt off my back if there's a need. It's about holding the contracts that we make, and where our contracts either were never made properly or are no longer fit for purpose. It's about redefining them, understanding that at the end of the day, we're all human. At the end of the day, you go to the toilet, I go to the toilet. I eat, you eat. We go to the bathroom. There are all certain fundamental bits of humanity, and we can't just go, no, I have a job title and you don't have that job title. even with all of that, there's a humanity. So there's something I would like to put in here to make sure that people really get that the work is robust. Right?
Yeah.
May I just take a minute to do
Oh,
that?
please. I would
Yeah.
love you to do that.
So I understand that, like you have disciplinary and grievances and policies and all of this stuff, right? So how I come at this is when you put a group of people together, and let's call that a workplace, right? Could be a gang, could be a family, could be anything, right? But a group of people come together, and no organisation is ever going to allow one person or one group of people to put a spanner in the works. It's not, because the cost of that to everyone, to the whole community, could be greater than the survival of the organisation.
Mm.
Okay. So I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with how we do it. Okay. And we can come on to that. So I get that. And we need to be able to communicate that to people, right? We need to be able to communicate. We're probably not going to let you stick a spanner in the works and bring the whole thing to a standstill because your individual needs are not being met. Okay. However, to get to that place, you don't get to that place by having rules and enforcement, because all rules and enforcement will do is send people into dark corners where they'll be discussing how to undermine a system that doesn't care about them in other ways that you won't see
Yeah.
until it's too late.
Absolutely. Because I think sometimes it's the inability for ill-equipped managers or leaders to deal with people who've all got spanners that they could chuck into the works, and their inability to deal with those does cause slow-moving, toxic problems within businesses. They're like, as you said, eventually it's too late to do something about it. So you've got this: no chance we'll let someone absolutely ruin my business through their behavior. But little versions of that are going on all the time, and our inability to deal with it could cause major problems for sure.
So if I start with that, then the next thing is, am I going to be able to run this business on my own with no other people? Should I just go live alone in a cave, set myself up and run? No, probably not. Probably for any business to scale or operate, it's going to require relationships. And what do I want from those relationships? From those relationships, I need trust, need mutuality, need cooperation, contribution, honesty, care, diligence. I mean, the stuff we need from those relationships doesn't come automatically. There are skills we have to learn. I can't demand trust and loyalty from you. I can't demand care and diligence from you. We can write it in a contract, and then I can go after you and performance manage you. And we can do all of those things. But in the end, what that will do to me as a leader is it will leave me trusting even less. It will leave me with what I had, that spiritual desert I talked about.
Yeah.
So I want to run a business. I want to make money. I come on to some principles about that in a minute. I want to put something wonderful out in the world, or be of service, or produce a product that that people want. But I also need to care for my own humanity.
Yeah.
I need to sleep at night. I
We'd
need
all
to
like that.
sleep. I need to eat good food. I need to take care of myself, because I'm one person when I'm fully resourced, and I'm a completely different person when I'm not resourced. So compassionate communication isn't top down. And so I think that's part of the thinking that needs to change. It isn't, I'm going to, as a leader, learn to be compassionate to others. It's compassion is a way of life. It's a way of life that says, why are we doing this? Why are we here? Now, I mean, look, if you run a business, a for-profit business, right, it must make a profit. There's no other way. Then run a non-profit or run a cooperative, right? It must make a profit if it's a for-profit business. Now, what you do with that profit, how you distribute that profit or reinvest it, and if you just want to buy yourself 10 Lamborghinis, then expect people are going to be pissed off with you.
Yeah.
Right? How you use that profit determines how your workforce will see you.
Mm.
And will also determine some of their willingness to go the extra mile. My work isn't, I teach you some compassionate communication, you use it on people, and then you get a result. There's a different paradigm that I'm asking people to step into that will bring riches that are often unquantifiable. So I wonder, how do you receive that?
Me, I think it's just wonderful. One of the reasons I set this podcast up was this ridiculous, in my head, because people will shout at me for saying things like that, but ridiculous notion that you can't have a humanity-based business and make it profitable. And I just don't believe that. I don't believe it. I think we're so conditioned to the top-down, beat the drum, do as you're told, and make me money sort of motif in old business. There's still too much. I think there's too much of that rhetoric still around today. I'd much rather have the will of the people around me and that sort of collegiate in it together spirit. And I don't care if anybody's listening to this going, "Oh God, there he goes again." That's what I thrive in. That's an environment I want to be part of. That's an environment I would feel happy leading, managing, working in. Because I think if you're inside an organization like that, where you've got that commonality of spirit, that curiosity of understanding, and I think at many times you spend so much time at work, that's the stuff that gives you a bit more meaning when you come home at the end of the day. It is not such an abrupt kind of work and home. It feels a bit more like you. It feels a bit more centered. And why that sort of organization can't be successful profitably and distribute it equally across its workers, I don't know. I don't know. I love it personally, Maria. I mean, that's why I've got you on the show, because I want other people. I love listening to people who challenge my view, but I'll be honest, I get a lot of validation from hearing people who are making much more of a success of this than me come on into this show and start talking about all the great things that they're doing. And maybe if one or two more listeners hear from other people, they'll start to believe and change and do things, and we'll all be in a better place as a result. Is that too long a winded answer for you?
Oh, no, it's just music. I mean, this is music to my ears, and we could be each other's mutual admiration. We could have just started that today. But what I wanted to respond to you was, the idea that there are people that say you can't make money and have a humanity-based whatever. And I like to give one of my robust answers to that, and I love where you're coming from, and clearly that's my agenda too. But if I want to get really robust and rough about it, the truth is you're not going to be able to run a business that's not humanity-based, because we raised a generation. We just raised a couple of generations where we gave them access to all the psychological phrases. We told them to look at psychology. We told them to look at their neurodiversity. We told them that they're allowed to be human.
Yep.
We gave them lots of rights. And I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't. I don't have an opinion about this. I'm just saying I'm trying to state a world as I see it.
It's
right?
a reality. It's a reality.
It's a reality to we said, oh, you got rights. There was a period where there was no parent who hadn't heard their child say, I've got rights. So we gave a lot of rights out. We gave them access to psychological terms. I mean, the number of people that will walk in, when I was running the practice and say, oh, I looked on the internet. It turns out my ex-husband or my ex-wife is a psychopath or whatever. We handed out all these names because they met all the criteria on the definition on Google, And so we've handed all this out to people. You've got rights. You're allowed to be different. We can actually name that for you. We put people through COVID restrictions where their freedoms were taken away and people didn't like that very much. And then we said, oh, but actually the powers that be didn't follow any of those rules.
Yeah.
They did something different.
Yeah.
So we've taken a whole generation and we've given them a completely different perspective, a different perspective to the one I was given.
Yep.
And now we're putting them in workplaces and they are saying, I'm not going to be treated like this. Do I want to work for you? I don't even know that I want a full-time job. I don't even know that that's a destination for me. And certainly if I do get here, you're going to have to be grateful that I'm coming to work for you. And
Which is
secondly, what is work in the first place? Nobody taught me what work is. And so I'm not sure I like the way that this is unfolding, the strategies, because it's just creating more them and us, right?
yeah.
It's feeding into that. But I can see that actually there's an expansion and a development and a shift. That my question is, how painful do you want this to be if
Which
you want to run a successful business?
Yeah. We can't have done all this stuff in the background and then moan that they use that platform.
And they're using it, and
They using the platform.
It's kind of right. Oh my God, I never expected the change to come from this doorway. And it's interesting to, it's interesting to step back and watch and understand. And leaders who can kind of at least come through the doorway into this world the way I'm seeing it have got a better chance of doing something less painfully.
Which I think leads us nicely on to your dialogue roadmap, maybe, in that if we're going to have these situations, going to have these conversations, what does that practical compassion look like in reality, in action? So can you unpack that map for us?
Yeah. So the origins of it are that, as part of my search for why do people fight, I saw that a lot of it was trained into us, indoctrinated into us, because, there's communicating with each other using words. There are other ways of communicating, but we're not going to cover that today. But communicating using words, right, are conversations. Now, there are many different types of conversation. And what I learned is the model of conversation that we have been indoctrinated with is debate. It's the debate model of conversation because we place such value on academia, the military, science, the law, and those disciplines all use debate. And the purpose of a debate is to have one argument prevail over all others, right? Now, within certain contexts, that's fine. But when that filters down into the way we entertain ourselves, watching films and, the way scripts are written, and when we bring that into our families, and when we put it in the classroom, and in the classroom, actually, in our education system, we have the worst form of that because it's debate plus enforcement. And that's the most toxic form of communication. So what I was looking for was what's the alternative? And dialogue is an alternative, yet it's never presented, it's never talked, it's certainly not in our mainstream. I started to see that in a dialogue, what we accept is that there isn't an argument to be won, that all the people involved and impacted have a piece of the answer. They have a piece, don't have it all, but we all have a piece of the answer. And that's a very different way of talking to each other. So then I started to look for how do you have a dialogue, and how do you have a dialogue when everything you've ever learned is a debate? How do you unlearn debate and learn dialogue? And there wasn't any kind of manual for it. So my work has been creating the very practical steps of how to have a dialogue. A debate comes from the head. A debate demands rational, logical thinking to put forward arguments to defeat the other. Okay? It's a very strategic, militaristic way of being in the world, right? A dialogue comes from a heart-based communication. It has a very different vibration around it. In fact, it says there may be differences that we need to discover or uncover, or tensions that need attending to. And we will attend to these because the cost of not attending it is too great. But how do we look after each other while we fathom this out? You're not an enemy or an adversary because we disagree.
Mm.
So the dialogue roadmap has a lot of understanding about the state that I'm in. Am I in the state of listening? So you can do these active listening skills, and I do have techniques to get you there. But it really is, am I in a state to receive? So there's a place of receiving. Then there's a place of human connection. That's the empathy. Like now we need to meet in our humanity. And then maybe I want to give you a gift in the form of feedback. And now so I've received. Now we can meet as our humans. I can understand this. I can't walk in your shoes, but I can try and accept this is where we are. This is whether we like it or not, this is the raw material we have between us right now.
Mm.
And now we need to share some gifts. So, and that comes as feedback, not criticism. I mean, the word feedback in the business is terrible. People hate it because all it means is an excuse to tell people how rubbish they are, right?
Mm.
But I'm talking about giving each other gifts. And
Yep.
some gifts are not as nice as others. Okay. Some gifts are really useful and some gifts are not so useful. And then how do we walk away from this with our dignity and our willingness to still be in relationship intact? And there are techniques I use in the dialogue roadmap to help people understand the state.
Mm.
Is that a sort of good enough answer? Does that?
Oh yeah, I'm just sat here with my mind kind of ticking over about all of these. I mean, listening to your roadmap, and I'm thinking of my own models that I would use when it comes to communication. I think the feedback thing is fascinating because it's a bit like performance management. Most people don't look at it through one eye, the negative, naughty, you've done something wrong eye, or you're not performing. But the other side of the coin is there too. You know, it's like, hey, that was brilliant. Keep doing more of that. And often we miss that reinforcement piece, the validation piece, which is actually what a lot of people crave and need to push them on to the next level. So I'm totally bought in to the framework. But do you get, when you're in businesses, are they hiring you because they get it but they don't know what to do, or are they hiring you because they realize, oh, we got problems, and actually it's because of me, because I'm all hierarchical and I've got emotional issues and la la la, help us out? Because you must come up against cynics to this all the time.
Oh, completely. Yeah. So there are sort of two types of businesses, for this work. One is where they've run into problems and, they just want a quick fix.
Yeah.
They want to hire an external mediator. They go around and look for the best price, bring someone in and hope they can put the fire out and get everyone back to work as quick as possible. And, sometimes that's needed. But I will often say, I'll do that to showcase what's possible, but on the basis that we can get a longer relationship. And then there are businesses that truly understand this and, they realise that this is not like an add-on. It's a way of, people talk about culture now, don't they? It's all about people and culture. the culture will override anything, and culture needs to shift. And it's a slow process of building people's confidence in something new and different. But you see, you go through that with this work, what you do, and I want to be really clear.
Yeah,
You go
please.
through this trust building to get to the point where you can start using shorthand with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jesus Christ, I am probably the most impatient person, and everyone who knows me will know that I have very little patience. So I love this work because it's taught me that I get to what I want quicker. I get to the goal quicker using these once everyone's bought in. So
And more
that's
sustainably, Maria, right? More sustainably. Once you do this stuff, you don't
absolutely.
have to keep going around the blinking loop the whole time.
Absolutely. I can't, this work's been really good for me because I'm traditionally not a patient person, and most things drive me mental, like, so, so this work's been very good for me, and I want to share that with people, I want people to have that. So so you go through this, and people learn and join, and then you have a trust basis, a sustainable trust basis from which I can use shorthand. I can say, oh, for fuck's sake, do we have to go around that again? And nobody's taking me to tribunal over it because we got the love.
Yeah.
Well, you know that I'll give you the shirt off my back if it came to it. That's
I,
the point. We're not dancing around. My issue, who can tell the truth in any workplace?
yeah. We talk about trust a lot on this podcast, and yet not enough, because it's the foundation for everything. And if you want performance and you want sustainable results, you only got to look at something like Lencioni's pyramid, 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's there in black and white that the difference between high performing teams and those also rans is a constant foundation of trust, and not something you tick once and go, right, we've done trust, let's move on. It's a work in progress for forever. But they realize that having that trust means you can have the sort of conversations you just talked about. You can show some vulnerability. I don't get this. I don't like this. I don't want this. I'm not sure about it. I can't do it all on my own. Help me. And challenge stuff through. And then if you can challenge stuff through, then we'll commit to stuff, we'll take accountability, and then the results will be there. But they'll be there in the long term, not this kind of like yin and yang short-termism stuff. But I don't know, in your experience, why do you think we've still got, I'm guessing, a high proportion of organizations who still fail at this stuff, who still rely on authority and hierarchy to sort conflict, which to me only fans the flames a lot, or at least, pisses people off and they leave.
Well, I mean, I could write a thesis on this. I think we could do
I've got to get you back. We haven't had enough time. That's ridiculous.
But if I have to give you a really short answer, so this hierarchical system, I name, it's not my words, it came from a theologian called Walter Wink, domination culture. And we have been programmed and indoctrinated with domination culture since birth in our mainstream society. And it's in the DNA. It's actually in the DNA. What I've discovered, it's in the DNA. Now, I've also discovered that empathy can change the DNA, but it's a process. And so we are so attached to this that it's hard to imagine another way. It's hard to take the leap into another way, because then you're going to be in uncertainty. And there is a period of uncertainty. But what I've learned in my 1-year training is how to carry people through that uncertainty, to see the gifts that this really brings.
We have had nothing like enough time to get into this. I'm going to have to get you back at some stage to have another chat, Maria, and what a chore that will be. I will love that. I do want to have a quick chat with you there before you go around how you've been integrating some of your more holistic practices And because you mentioned at the top about your energy work and your Reiki
Yeah.
work, and I've just sort of said you've got skeptics talking about compassionate conversation and communication. My God, when you walk in and say you're going to do Reiki, I bet you get some right old looks.
No,
Right?
I don't talk about Reiki, but I do talk about energy. And
Yeah.
one of the things I will say that I think most people can relate to is when you put a group of people, when you shove a group of people together with some kind of aim or connection or some reason to be together, a lot of what's happening is I come in at my frequency and you come in at your frequency. And a lot of that forming,
Yeah.
storming,
Yeah.
a lot of
Norming,
all of
performing,
that
morning, all that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever, is we're we're trying to find the frequency that we can all um operate at. We're
Yeah.
trying to find that vibrational frequency, and that takes quite a lot of fluctuation. And the mistake that people often make is we know how good it could be, right? But you're never going to hit the top vibration. You never, because people are messy.
Mm.
Working with people, being in relationship is messy, and you're never going to be able to regulate that into the best it can ever be. So we have to find the bandwidth. But when we can't hit the top, what we mustn't do is then go down into the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's the work. If you want me to talk about more about that so that energetic piece fits then with the language and the words we're using and moving into dialogue rather than debate.
It's all that is the holistic piece, isn't it? That is what makes this a human topic, right? It's not a one element. It's all of us, and bringing all of us to these conversations into our communication. I guess that is the whole point, right? Rather than relying on these outdated things. Maria, we have run out of time already, which is mad. But before we think about anything else, I have this part in the show I like to call sticky notes, where I'm going to ask you for your best bits of advice, your pearls of wisdom, Maria, that if people are listening to this and going, right, I do need to embed this stuff. I need to embed some more compassionate communication in my workplace. What 3 pieces of advice that you would fit on 3 little sticky notes would you leave us with?
Oh, right. Gosh. So the first one is check your own reactions and triggers. So the first and number one thing is it starts with you. It starts with you. Ask yourself, am I resourced? Just because I'm feeling triggered, does it mean there's any kind of emergency going on right now? So and what's the likely impact of what I'm about to do? So then the next one would be, is what I am about to do worth the cost to the relationships that I've built up?
Ooh. Mm.
Is it worth it? And then the third one would be, how do I take the temperature of what's happening in my team, group, business, client base? And these 3 things are an art, not a science.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to end your sticky notes. Some very thought-provoking questions asked in there as well. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. As has been this time I've had to spend with you, Maria, I have absolutely loved meeting you and listening to you. I have absolutely no doubt this is not our last conversation. Not if I have my way anyway. If people want to find out a bit more about you, where can they find you? Where are you hiding? And tell us about this podcast that you're doing as well.
Thank you. Well, my podcast is called All Things Conflict, and I'm fully expecting you to be a guest on it. I think that's a given. And luckily, I have a fairly unusual name, Maria Arpa, ARPA. So if you Google me, I will show up. And if you email me from one of the websites, you'll get to me. Not difficult to find me.
Brilliant.
And I love sharing these gifts. I love sharing this work. So yeah, bring it on.
Well, I can feel your energy and I'm sure the listeners can too. Maria, it's been fantastic having you on. Thank you so much for your time, and I will definitely speak to you again soon.
Thank you. Much love to you. Thank
And
you.
you, my love. Okay, everyone, that was Maria Arpa. And if you'd like to find out any more about the things we've talked about on the episode, or find out some more bits and pieces about Maria, then please go ahead and check out the show notes. So, that concludes today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and heard something maybe that will help you become a stickier, more successful business from the inside going forwards. If you have, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Andy Gorham, and you've been listening to the Sticky from the Inside podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.